Tensions running high in Paris after France's Constitutional Council approved President Emmanuel Macron's plan to raise the country's retirement age from 62 to 64. So you see here, demonstrators have taken to the streets again to rally against this measure. President Macron's political opponents are also vowing to keep up their fight to have the government withdraw this bill. The president says that the government needs to raise the retirement age to help balance the country's pension budget. ABC News foreign correspondent Tom Soufi-Burridge is in Paris now with the latest for us. So, Tom, how are demonstrators responding to the council's decision to raise this retirement age? I mean, clearly they're not happy.
Yeah, Kenya, there's still a lot of anger on the streets. I mean, basically, just adjacent to where I am, you can see the riot police poised behind me. There was a relatively small demonstration right in the heart of Paris. The atmosphere changed very quickly within the last few minutes. A riot police tried to move the protesters down the street. There were some small scuffles. Protesters set on fire a few bicycles, effectively, in one of the main squares. I mean, most of the protesters we spoke to before the tension kind of rose in this area between the police and the protesters really were saying that this is about social rights. This is about preventing people who do not earn huge sums of money from having to work longer, and potentially, you know, people who don't have, in their view, a longer life expectancy linked to the quality of their life, potentially having to work into their 60s. And what's true is, yes, one of the big headlines about this reform is that the minimum retirement age will go from 62 to 64, but it's a bit more complicated than that. This is a hugely complicated reform. It means that some people, if they've studied long, will actually have to work well beyond 64. So it's not as straightforward, I guess, as sometimes it's portrayed. There's a lot of anger on the streets. What's difficult now is that this decision has gone against the protesters. What's difficult is to work out where this goes next, whether or not the protests begin to fizzle out, or whether the protest movement, the unions and the political parties, both on the left and right, that support the protesters, are going to continue with strikes, continue with the protests. The government, Macron, the President Macron, does not show any sign that he's ready to back down. For him, the decision by this constitutional body today is really a rubber stamp on his law, which is set to come into effect in September. Kana?
Okay, and Tom, we're showing live pictures of these protests as you're talking, and there's clearly no slowing down here. And you're right to point out this is more complicated than just an additional 2 years of work. But what about the potential discussions between union leaders and Macron? What is the latest from the president himself? And when could he enact this bill? It could happen pretty quickly, right?
The bill, well, is going to be enacted straight away, according to Macron today. I mean, look, President Macron, the Elysee Palace, his organisation, his presidency, his office, has basically said that their door is still open to negotiations. The president is really kind of pushing the idea that he's ready to sit down again with the unions. But I think in reality, there is no sense that either of these two sides have any common position and that they can reach any type of compromise in this. I think what is crucial is how this is playing out in the country at large. We've seen polls in the last few weeks and months show that, generally speaking, French people support the protesters. They support the notion that the minimum retirement age should not be increased. But it's unclear that if these protests, if these national strikes continue, whether popular support will continue for the protests and whether the protest movement can maintain its momentum. I mean, speaking to some protesters out on the streets today, and just to emphasize, it was a relatively small protest here in Paris, a very big one yesterday on the day of a national strike. But the protesters we spoke to said they are not going to back down. They see the potential for more violence on the streets, more radical protests. Some of them said that. For a lot of people here, it's a peaceful protest. It's about protecting social rights, but there is tension on the streets. And we've seen it just within the last few minutes. Riot police really coming in. They're trying to contain the protesters in certain parts of the city because the government, the authorities here, do not want violence. They do not want the image of Paris to be one of violence and destruction, which we have seen on certain occasions in limited parts of the city over the last few weeks. Kana?
All right, Tom Soufi-Burridge, our thanks to you as you again are looking at live pictures there from Paris of these protests. Thank you again, Tom.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.